Did you like the flowers I gave you, Mom? I looked down at the small plastic stem in my hand, the petals a dull shade of pink that didn't even try to imitate something real. What flowers? I asked quietly. My daughter froze for just a second, just long enough for me to notice. Behind her, her mother-in-law lifted her hand, slowly, deliberately, so the diamond caught the light. It wasn't subtle. A large, brilliant stone set in platinum. The kind of ring you don't just buy. The kind you announce. "Oh, Mom," my daughter said with a quick laugh. Too quick. "Don't be like that. It's just something small. Simple." Simple. I nodded. Of course. Her mother-in-law smiled then. Not warmly. Not kindly. Just enough to show she understood exactly what had happened here, and that she approved of it. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and tell me where you're watching from. I have a feeling my story might travel farther than I ever did." Mother's Day had always meant something to me. Not because of gifts. I was never the kind of woman who cared about jewelry or expensive dinners. I built my life from the ground up, literally. When my husband passed away 12 years ago, he left me with a small manufacturing business and a mountain of uncertainty. Everyone assumed I would sell it. I didn't. I learned everything. Accounting, logistics, negotiations. I sat in rooms full of men who looked at me like I didn't belong there, and I stayed until they stopped looking. By the time I turned 68, that small business had grown into a company with over 80 employees and contracts across 3 states. But none of that mattered in that moment, because I was standing in my daughter's dining room, holding a $5 plastic flower, while another woman, someone who had come into our lives less than a decade ago, was being celebrated like royalty. The table was beautiful. My daughter had always had an eye for detail. White linen tablecloth, gold-trimmed plates, fresh roses in the centerpieces. Real roses. I noticed that. Lunch had been her idea. "Just something small, Mom," she'd said over the phone. "Family only." Family. I arrived 10 minutes early, like I always do. I brought a homemade lemon pie, her favorite when she was a little girl. I still remembered the way she used to stand on a chair beside me in the kitchen, barely tall enough to see over the counter, insisting on stirring the filling. "More sugar, Mom," she'd say, even when it didn't need it. Back then, everything about her was sweet. When she opened the door that day, she hugged me, but it felt brief. Polite. "You didn't have to bring anything," she said, glancing at the pie. "I wanted to," I replied. She stepped aside to let me in, already turning her attention back to something happening in the kitchen. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, just long enough to feel it. That shift. Her husband was setting the table. He gave me a nod. Not unfriendly, just distant. And then there was her mother-in-law, seated at the head of the table. I paused. That had always been my seat. No one said anything about it. No one needed to. The message was already clear. I smiled and took a chair off to the side. Lunch started pleasantly enough. Light conversation. Safe topics. Weather. Travel plans. A new restaurant downtown. I listened more than I spoke. That's something you learn over time. When you're no longer at the center of someone's life, you become an observer of it. Then came the gifts. My daughter stood up, clapping her hands lightly. "Okay, I wanted to do something special this year." She turned first, not to me, but to her mother-in-law. "I just want to say thank you for everything you've done for us. For always being there. For supporting us." Her voice softened in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in years. She handed over a small velvet box. Everyone watched. The box opened. Gasps. A diamond ring. Large enough that even across the table, I could see the way it caught and fractured the light. "And," my daughter continued, smiling brightly, "I also booked you a 2-week cruise. Mediterranean." Applause. Her mother-in-law placed a hand over her chest, visibly touched. "Oh, sweetheart, you didn't have to." But she didn't look surprised. Not at all. Then my daughter turned to me. "And for you, Mom, I got you something too." She reached behind her and handed me a thin paper bag. No box. No ribbon. I opened it slowly. The plastic flower was wrapped in tissue paper. There was a small card attached. "Happy Mother's Day." No message inside. Just her name. Signed quickly. Almost carelessly. I looked up. Everyone was watching me. Waiting. So I smiled. "It's lovely," I said. And I meant it. Not the flower. The moment. Because in that moment, everything became clear. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Like a puzzle piece sliding into place. I set the flower gently on the table beside my plate. I didn't ask questions. I didn't compare. I didn't react. Because something inside me had already shifted. The rest of the lunch passed in a blur of laughter and conversation that didn't include me. Plans for the cruise. Discussions about excursions. Shopping lists. At one point, my daughter leaned over to her mother-in-law and said, "You deserve this." I heard it. I just didn't respond. When lunch ended, I helped clear the table. Old habits. My daughter stopped me halfway to the kitchen. "Mom, you don't have to do that." "I know," I said, but I did it anyway. Because some things are hard to unlearn. As I gathered the plates, I caught my reflection in the window. For a moment, I saw myself the way they must see me now. Not as the woman who built something. Not as the mother who gave everything. Just someone who could be given a plastic flower and expected to say thank you. I placed the dishes in the sink, washed my hands, and picked up my purse. "You're leaving already?" my daughter asked. "I have an early morning tomorrow," I replied. That wasn't a lie. She walked me to the door. "Drive safe, Mom." "I will." I stepped outside into the afternoon sun. It was warmer than I expected. Bright. Almost too bright. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, the plastic flower resting on the passenger seat. $5. Maybe less. I picked it up, turning it slowly between my fingers. Then I set it down again. And for the first time that day, I allowed myself to think one simple thought. If this is what I'm worth to her, then maybe it's time I reconsider what she's worth to me. I started the engine. Because something had already begun, and I intended to see it through. The drive home felt longer than usual. Not because of traffic. There wasn't any. It was a clear Sunday afternoon. The kind of quiet, golden light that makes everything look softer than it really is. Houses passed by in a blur. Neatly trimmed lawns, children riding bikes, families gathered on porches. I used to have that. Or at least, I thought I did. My hands rested lightly on the steering wheel. Steady. Controlled. The same way they had been in that dining room. I didn't cry. That might surprise you. But at a certain point in life, tears stop being your first reaction. They get replaced by something else. Something quieter. Something sharper. Understanding. When I pulled into my driveway, the house greeted me the same way it always had. Silent, still, unchanged. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of lemon polish and old wood. Clean. Familiar. Mine. I placed my purse on the console table, set the plastic flower beside it, and stood there for a moment. Just looking at it. It didn't belong in this house. Not because it was cheap, but because it was careless. There's a difference. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Took a slow sip. Set the glass down carefully. Everything I did felt deliberate. Measured. Like I was recalibrating something inside myself. For years, no, decades, I had told myself a simple story. That love looked like sacrifice. That being a good mother meant giving more, expecting less. That if I just kept showing up, kept supporting, kept understanding, it would come back to me. Not in money, not in gifts, in respect. But respect, I was beginning to understand, doesn't grow automatically. It's taught. And somewhere along the way, I had taught my daughter the wrong lesson. I moved into the living room and sat down in my usual chair. The one by the window. The one my husband used to joke was command central because I could see everything from there. The company had started at this very table. A folding desk. A second-hand phone. One client. I still remember the first contract I signed after he passed. My hands had been shaking. Then, not from fear. From pressure. There's a difference there too. Fear makes you want to run. Pressure forces you to rise. I chose to rise. Day by day. Deal by deal. Mistake by mistake. I missed holidays. I skipped vacations. I said no to things I wanted so I could say yes to things that mattered. For her. For my daughter. Her college tuition. Paid in full. Her first apartment. I covered the deposit. When she and her husband wanted to buy their house, but the bank hesitated, I stepped in. I believe in them, I told the loan officer. I remember that conversation clearly. Funny, the things that stay with you. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. Not to escape. To remember. There were signs. Of course there were. There always are. Small things at first. Phone calls that got shorter. Visits that got postponed. Conversations that felt surface level. I told myself she was busy. That life gets complicated. That marriages change priorities. All of that is true. But truth has layers. And beneath those layers, there's something else. Choice. Respect is a choice. Attention is a choice. And that day, Mother's Day, she had made hers very clear. I opened my eyes and looked across the room. On the far wall hung a framed photo from years ago. She couldn't have been more than 8. Missing front teeth, hair in uneven pigtails, holding up a lopsided handmade card that said "Best Mom Ever" in bright crayon. I smiled, not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. That was the moment I realized something important. I wasn't losing my daughter that day. I had already lost her. Just slowly, quietly, over time, and I had allowed it. Because I thought patience was strength. Because I thought silence was grace. Because I believed that love, if given enough room, would correct itself. But love without boundaries? That's not love. That's permission. I stood up and walked back to the entryway. The plastic flower was still there, exactly where I left it. I picked it up again, turning it in my hand. Lightweight, hollow, manufactured. No scent, no life, no effort. I walked to the trash can, stopped, and then, I didn't throw it away. Instead, I placed it carefully. In a drawer. Not as a keepsake. As a reminder. Because moments like that, clear, undeniable moments, are rare. They show you exactly where you stand. No guessing. No interpreting. Just truth. I closed the drawer gently. Then I turned and walked down the hallway toward my office. Most people don't know this, but I never really retired. I stepped back, yes. Hired a management team. Delegated day-to-day operations. But my name? Still on everything. Every contract. Every decision that mattered. The company wasn't just an asset. It was a legacy. And legacies require careful handling. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The screen lit up, casting a soft glow across the room. Emails. Reports. Numbers. All familiar. All steady. Unlike the chaos of that afternoon. I clicked into one file in particular. Ownership structure. I hadn't looked at it in months. No reason to. Until now. My daughter's name wasn't there. Not yet. But I knew, without her ever saying it directly, that she expected it to be. Eventually. Naturally. As if it were simply owed. I rested my hand on the trackpad. Still. Calm. Then I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. For the first time that day, I allowed myself a small, quiet thought. Not emotional. Not reactive. Strategic. Maybe it's time I make a decision. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But out of clarity. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And once you understand your value, you stop handing it to people who treat it like a $5 flower. I closed the laptop. Not yet. Timing matters. It always has. I stood up, turned off the light, and left the office. Behind me, everything remained exactly as it was. For now. But something had shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. And sometimes that's all it takes. The next morning, I woke up at exactly 6 a.m. No alarm. I hadn't needed one in years. My body was trained that way. Decades of early mornings, long days, and responsibilities that didn't wait for anyone's emotions to settle. I lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels lonely. The kind that feels honest. No forced conversations. No polite smiles. No pretending. Just space. I got up, made my bed with the same precise movements I'd done every day for the past 40 years, and walked into the kitchen. Coffee. Black. 2 slices of toast. Lightly buttered. Simple things. I sat at the kitchen table, the morning light stretching across the wood surface, and for a brief second, everything felt normal. Routine has a way of doing that. It softens reality. But not for long. My phone buzzed. Once. Then again. I didn't reach for it immediately. I took a sip of coffee first. Set the cup down. Then, slowly, I picked up the phone and glanced at the screen. My daughter. Calling. I let it ring. It stopped. A second later, another call. I watched it this time. Listened to the sound. Then silence. Then again. By the 4th call, I already knew something had changed. People don't call like that unless something matters to them. Not truly. Not urgently. I placed the phone face down on the table and finished my breakfast. There was no rush. Whatever this was, it could wait. By the time I stood up and rinsed my plate, the phone had lit up 8 times. Missed calls. No voicemail. Interesting. I dried my hands with a clean towel and walked down the hallway toward my office. The same office I had stepped into the night before. The same desk. The same laptop. The same files. But this time, there was no hesitation. I sat down, opened the laptop, and logged in. Emails flooded the screen, but I ignored them. Instead, I went straight to the documents I had reviewed the night before. Ownership, shares, transfer structures, everything that defined who had control and who didn't. My daughter's name still wasn't there. And for the first time, that felt right. The phone buzzed again. I didn't look at it. Not yet. Instead, I opened a new tab and searched for a contact I hadn't needed in a long time. My attorney, a man named Richard Hale. We'd worked together for over 20 years. He handled my husband's estate, helped me structure the company when things started to grow. He was careful, precise, and most importantly, he didn't ask unnecessary questions. I clicked on his name and hit call. He picked up on the second ring. Good morning, he said, voice steady as always. This is Richard. It's me, I replied. A brief pause. Mrs. Carter, he said, a note of recognition settling in. It's been a while. Yes, I said. It has. What can I do for you? I leaned back slightly in my chair, my gaze drifting toward the window. The sunlight was stronger now. Clear. Sharp. I need to review my options, I said. Regarding the company. Another pause. Not surprised. Just attentive. Are you considering restructuring? He asked. Possibly, I replied. Or something more permanent. I see. His tone didn't change. That's why I trusted him. When would you like to come in? He asked. As soon as possible. I have an opening this afternoon at 2 o'clock. That works. I'll have everything prepared, he said. Is there anything specific you'd like me to pull up? Yes, I said. Full ownership transfer scenarios, sale options, and contingency clauses. Understood. We ended the call. I closed the laptop halfway, not fully, just enough to pause. Then I reached for my phone. The screen lit up instantly. 17 missed calls. All from her. Still no voicemail. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about concern. It was about urgency. And urgency, in situations like this, usually comes from fear. I unlocked the phone and scrolled through the call log slowly. Call after call. Closer together now. Desperation has a rhythm. I set the phone down again. Still no response. Not yet. Instead, I stood up, walked back to the kitchen, and poured myself another cup of coffee. The second one always tastes different. Stronger. More intentional. As I leaned against the counter, I let my mind drift, not to yesterday, but to moments before that. Small conversations. Comments I hadn't paid attention to at the time. Mom, you should really think about stepping back more. You've worked hard enough. It would be nice to, simplify things. At the time, they sounded like concern. Now, they sounded like preparation. I took a slow sip, set the cup down, and nodded to myself. It made sense. Everything did. The ring, the cruise, the performance. It wasn't about love. It was about positioning. Who mattered more? Who would receive more? Who was worth investing in? And I had just been shown exactly where I stood. The phone buzzed again. I walked back over, picked it up, and this time, I answered. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened. Mom, her voice came through, tight, breathless. Mom, finally, why aren't you picking up? I've been calling you all morning. I let a second pass. Then another. I was having breakfast, I said calmly. A pause. Then, quickly, too quickly. Mom, listen. I need to talk to you. It's important. I sat down at the table, my fingers resting lightly against the edge. I have a meeting this afternoon, I replied. Make it quick. Another pause. Longer this time. As if she was choosing her words carefully. Or realizing she needed to. Mom, she said again, softer now. You're not doing anything with the company, are you? There it was. No, how are you? No, did you get home safe? Straight to the point. I looked out the window, watching the lights shift across the yard. I'm always doing something with the company, I said. Silence. Then, Mom, please, she said. And this time, the word carried something different. Not authority. Not assumption. Fear. Don't sell it. I didn't respond immediately. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, everything had already changed. And she knew it. I didn't answer her right away. Not because I didn't hear her, but because I wanted her to sit in that silence. Don't sell it. The words were still hanging there, fragile and urgent, like they might break if I touched them too quickly. I leaned back slightly in my chair, my fingers resting calmly on the table. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Normal sounds. Steady. Unlike the tension in her voice. Why? I asked. Just one word. Soft. Measured. On the other end, I heard her inhale sharply. Mom, what do you mean, why? She said, a nervous edge creeping in. That's the company. Dad's company. Your company. Yes, I said. It is. Silence. Then she tried again, faster this time. It's been in the family for years. You can't just decide to sell it without talking to me. I let that sit for a moment. Without talking to me. Interesting. I see, I said. Another pause. Longer. Heavier. Mom, I'm serious, she continued, her voice tightening. You can't make a decision like that alone. I looked down at my hand resting on the table. Steady. Still. The same hand that had signed every contract. Paid every bill. Built everything she was now afraid to lose. I've been making decisions like that alone for a very long time, I replied. That stopped her. I could feel it. The shift. Mom, she said again, softer now. That's not what I meant. Of course it wasn't. It never is. I stood up slowly and walked toward the window, phone still at my ear. The sunlight had moved higher now, casting sharper lines across the yard. Clear. Unforgiving. Then what did you mean? I asked. She hesitated. And in that hesitation was the truth. I just think, she started, then stopped. I think we should talk about it as a family. A family. The word landed differently this time. I let out a quiet breath. Yesterday, I said, did you think about me as family? Silence. Complete. No background noise. No quick response. Just absence. I didn't press. I didn't need to. Because that silence said more than anything she could have come up with. Mom, that's not fair, she said finally, her voice lower now. Defensive. I didn't say anything was fair, I replied. Another pause. Then, it was just a gift, she said. You're overthinking it. A gift. I closed my eyes for a brief second. Not in frustration. In clarity. A gift reflects thought, I said. Effort. Consideration. It was symbolic, she insisted quickly. Something simple. You always said you didn't like expensive things. I nodded slightly, even though she couldn't see me. That's true, I said. I don't. Relief flickered in her tone immediately. Exactly, so, but I do value respect. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't change my tone. And yet, everything shifted. She went quiet again, this time longer. Careful. Mom, she said, choosing each word now. You're taking this too personally. I almost smiled. Too personally. As if there were another way to take something like that. I'm taking it exactly as it was given, I replied. She exhaled sharply. Okay, fine, she said, a hint of frustration slipping through. Maybe I didn't think it through. But that doesn't mean you should do something extreme. There it was. Not apology. Adjustment. Minimization. I turned slightly, leaning my shoulder against the wall. What do you think I'm going to do? I asked. I don't know, she said quickly. That's the problem. You're not telling me anything. And now you're talking about meetings and restructuring and, Mom, people don't just do that overnight. I let her words settle. People don't just do that overnight. She was right. They don't. This hadn't started yesterday. Yesterday had just revealed it. I have a meeting at 2, I said calmly. With Richard. She froze. I could hear it in the silence. You already called him? She asked. Yes. Another pause. Shorter this time. Tighter. Mom. Please, she said. And now there was no attempt to hide it anymore. Just wait. Don't make any decisions yet. Let's talk first. Let's sit down together. Together. Now. After everything had been made clear, I walked back to the table and sat down again. My gaze fell on the empty space where the flower had been earlier. Gone. Put away. Exactly where it belonged. Why now? I asked. The question was simple, but it carried weight. She didn't answer immediately, because there was no easy answer. Because it affects me, she said finally. Honest. At least partially. And yesterday didn't? I asked. She inhaled sharply again. Mom, this isn't about yesterday. But it was. It had always been. Everything is. I rested my hand flat against the table, feeling the cool surface beneath my palm. Grounding. I think it is, I said. Silence again. Longer this time. Then, softer. I didn't think it would matter that much to you, she admitted. There it was. Not cruelty. Not even intentional harm. Just assumption. And sometimes, that cuts deeper. I nodded slowly. I know, I said. That seemed to confuse her. You know, she repeated. Yes. Because that was the problem. Not that she wanted something, but that she didn't think I mattered in the process. I have to go. I said, glancing at the clock. It wasn't time. Yet. But the conversation was. Mom, wait, she started. I'll let you know what I decide. I continued, my voice calm. Even. Mom, please don't do anything without telling me first. I paused. Just for a second. Then, I already am. And with that, I ended the call. The silence that followed was different. Not heavy. Not uncertain. Clear. I placed the phone down gently on the table and sat there for a moment. Not thinking. Not questioning. Just being. Because the truth had already settled in. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. And this time, I wasn't going to ignore it. I didn't move right away after the call ended. I just sat there, looking at nothing in particular. The house was quiet again. But this time, it felt different. Not peaceful. Not empty. Focused. Like everything unnecessary had been stripped away, leaving only what mattered. I reached for my coffee, now lukewarm, and took a slow sip. It didn't taste the same. But I drank it anyway. Because some things aren't about comfort. They're about habit. And habits take time to change. I stood up, rinsed the cup, and placed it carefully on the drying rack. Every movement deliberate. Every step grounded. Then I walked back to my office. The door was still slightly open from earlier. I pushed it gently and stepped inside. Same desk. Same chair. Same life. But I wasn't the same person who had sat here yesterday. Not anymore. I closed the door behind me. Not all the way. Just enough. I sat down, opened my laptop again, and this time, I didn't hesitate. No second thoughts. No emotional pause. Just action. I pulled up the documents Richard would need later. Ownership records. Financial summaries. Asset breakdowns. Numbers filled the screen. Clean. Precise. Honest. Unlike people, numbers don't pretend. I scrolled slowly. Not because I needed to read everything. I already knew it. But because I wanted to feel it. To remind myself what this really was. Not just a company. A lifetime. Years of early mornings. Late nights. Decisions no one saw. Risks no one shared. And through all of it, I never once asked anyone for permission. So why would I start now? My phone buzzed again. A message this time. I didn't open it immediately. I let it sit there. Then another buzz. And another. Finally, I reached over and picked it up. 3 messages. All from her. Mom, please answer. We need to talk about this. Don't do anything yet. I'm coming over. I read them once. Then again. Then I set the phone back down, without replying. Coming over. That was new. For months, I had been the one asking. Do you want to stop by? Are you free this weekend? Maybe we can have dinner? There was always something. Always a reason to postpone. Now suddenly, she had time. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. Urgency changes priorities. It always does. I turned back to the screen and opened a new folder. Transfer scenarios. Different options appeared. Partial sale. Full acquisition. External investors. Each one came with its own implications. Its own consequences. I studied them carefully. Not emotionally. Strategically. Because this wasn't about proving a point. It was about correcting a pattern. A pattern I had allowed for too long. My eyes paused on one option in particular. Full sale. Clean. Final. No shared control. No future negotiations. No expectations. Just closure. I didn't click it yet. But I didn't look away either. Instead, I let the idea settle. Not as a reaction. As a possibility. A few minutes later, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I didn't need to look. I already knew. The engine turned off. A door slammed. Quick footsteps. Then, the front door opening. Mom, her voice called out. Louder than usual. Tighter. I stayed where I was. Didn't answer. Her footsteps moved quickly through the house. Closer. Mom, where are you? Then she appeared at the office door. Slightly out of breath. Hair pulled back in a hurry. No makeup. No preparation. Just urgency. Her eyes landed on me immediately. Relief. Then concern. Then something else. Fear. Why didn't you answer my messages? She asked, stepping inside. I looked at her for a moment before responding. I was working. She glanced at the laptop screen. At the documents. At the numbers. Her expression shifted instantly. What is this? She asked. You tell me, I said calmly. She stepped closer, eyes scanning quickly. Transfer sale? Mom, what are you doing? Her voice rose slightly. Not loud, but strained. I'm reviewing my options, I replied. You said you had a meeting this afternoon. I do. Then why are you already? Because I like to be prepared. That stopped her. Just for a second. Then she shook her head, pacing slightly. No, 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 this is too fast, she said. You can't just decide this overnight. I watched her quietly. Again, the same assumption. Overnight. This didn't start overnight, I said. She stopped pacing. Looked at me. What does that mean? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I closed the laptop halfway. Not shutting it down. Just pausing. It means, I said slowly, that yesterday wasn't the beginning. Her brows furrowed. Then what was it? I held her gaze. It was the moment I stopped ignoring it. Silence. Heavy. Real. She swallowed. Mom, it was just a gift, she said again, softer now. You're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't react. Didn't argue. Didn't correct her. Because I had already moved past that point. This isn't about the gift, I said. Then what is it about? She asked, frustration creeping back in. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hands on the desk. It's about value, I said. She blinked. Confused. What? How you see me, I continued. How you've been seeing me for a long time. That's not true, she said quickly. Isn't it? Another pause. Her eyes flickered. Searching. Defending. But not answering. You think I don't care about you? She asked. I think, I said calmly. You stopped considering me. That hit. I saw it. In the way her shoulders stiffened. In the way her eyes dropped for just a second. Mom, she started, but the words didn't come easily now. Good. Because for once, she had to think. And I wasn't going to fill the silence for her. Not this time. She didn't speak right away. For the first time since she walked into the house, she had nothing ready. No quick explanation. No easy defense. Just silence. And that silence told me more than anything she could have said. I didn't rush to fill it. I simply sat there, hands resting calmly on the desk, watching her try to find the right words. Mom, that's not fair, she said finally, her voice quieter now. Fair. I almost smiled at that. Fair. I repeated gently. She nodded, though there was hesitation in it now. You're making it sound like I've been ignoring you. Like I don't care. I tilted my head slightly. Not dismissing. Just observing. Have you? I asked. She opened her mouth. Then stopped. Because the answer wasn't simple. And we both knew it. I've been busy, she said instead. You know that. Work, the house, everything with his family, not ours. I let that settle between us. I understand being busy, I said. I lived that life longer than you have. She exhaled, frustrated. Then why are you acting like this? Acting. As if this were new. As if this were sudden. I leaned back slightly in my chair. I'm not acting, I said. I'm adjusting. That word landed differently. She frowned. What does that even mean? It means, I continued, I'm responding to what's already been there. She shook her head. No, Mom, this is about yesterday. You're upset, and you're letting it affect everything. I didn't interrupt her. Let her finish. People make mistakes, she added. It wasn't perfect, okay? But it doesn't justify this. She gestured toward the laptop, toward the documents, toward the possibility she didn't like. I followed her gesture with my eyes, then looked back at her. You're right, I said. She paused, caught off guard. I am, she asked. Yes, I said calmly. It wasn't perfect. A flicker of relief crossed her face. Too soon. But it wasn't a mistake either. That took it away. Her expression tightened again. What is that supposed to mean? It means you didn't forget, I said. You chose. Her jaw shifted slightly. That's not true, isn't it? I didn't sit there thinking, let me disrespect my mother today, she said, her voice rising just a little. I didn't say you did. Then what are you saying? I held her gaze. I'm saying you knew exactly what you were doing, just not what it meant. Silence. Again. But this time, it was heavier. Because now, she was starting to understand. Not emotionally. Logically. And logic is harder to argue with. She looked away first. Toward the window. Toward anything that wasn't me. I was trying to do something nice, she said after a moment. For her. I know. She's been helping us a lot lately. I'm aware. Her eyes snapped back to mine. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached forward and slowly closed the laptop completely this time. A soft click. Final. It means I've been paying attention, I said. She went still. Completely still. Because now, we were getting closer to it. The part she hadn't expected me to see. Mom, she started, more cautious now. You're reading too much into things. Am I? Yes. Then explain it to me. She blinked. What? Explain it, I repeated calmly. Help me understand. Another pause. Longer this time. Because now, she had to choose her words carefully. There's nothing to explain, she said finally. We've just been spending more time with his family. That's all. Why? Because it's easier sometimes, she said quickly. They're closer, they're more involved. And I'm not. That stopped her. Immediately. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Her lips pressed together. Frustration. But underneath it, something else. Uncertainty. Mom, you've always been independent, she said. You don't need people the way they do. I finished. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. Yes. I let out a quiet breath. There it was. The justification. She needs you more, I said. It's not like that. But it is. No. It's easier to give more to someone who asks for it, I continued. Even if they haven't earned it. Her expression shifted again. That one hit closer. You're twisting this, she said. I'm clarifying it. Silence. Again. But this time, she didn't look away. She held my gaze, trying to regain control. Okay, she said after a moment. Fine. Maybe I've been spending more time there. Maybe I've been focusing on that side more. But that doesn't mean I don't value you. I nodded slowly. I didn't say you didn't value me, I said. Then what are you saying? I leaned forward slightly. That your actions don't reflect it. That landed. Hard. She stepped back a little. Not physically, but emotionally. You're making this into something bigger than it is, she said, quieter now. No, I replied. I'm seeing it for what it is. Another pause. Then, Mom, please, she said again, and now the edge was gone. Don't do anything drastic. We can fix this. Fix. I let that word sit for a moment. Rolled it over in my mind. Then I shook my head slightly. This isn't something you fix, I said. Her brows pulled together. Then what is it? I looked at her. Calm. Certain. It's something you understand. Silence. Deep. Unavoidable. Because this time, there was no argument left. No easy way out. Just truth. And the space it creates when it finally settles in. She stood there for a long moment after I said that. Not moving. Not arguing. Just standing in it. That space between us had changed. Before, it was filled with assumptions. With roles we both played without thinking. Mother. Daughter. Provider. Receiver. Now it was something else. Clearer. Less comfortable. Understand what? She asked finally, her voice quieter than before. I didn't answer right away. Because this part wasn't about explaining. It was about remembering. I stood up slowly from my chair and walked past her, out of the office. I didn't check if she followed. I knew she would. Some habits don't disappear overnight. I walked into the living room and stopped in front of the wall where the photos hung. Years of them. Captured moments. Frozen versions of who we used to be. I reached up and touched one frame lightly. She was about 12 in this one. Standing in front of the old storefront, the very first location of the business. Her smile wide, proud, holding a crooked sign that read, Grand Opening. You made that sign? I said quietly. Behind me, I heard her step closer. I remember, she said. Her voice had softened. Different now. Less defensive. More uncertain. You insisted on using glitter, I added. It got everywhere. Took me weeks to clean it out of the carpet. A small breath of a laugh escaped her. I thought it made it look more professional, she said. I nodded. You did. Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was reflective. I kept that sign for years, I continued. Even after we moved to the second building. She didn't respond. So I kept going. Not to accuse. Not to remind her of what she owed. Just to lay the pieces out. You used to come by after school, I said. Sit in the back office. Do your homework while I finished paperwork. I liked it there, she said quietly. I know. I turned slightly, leaning against the edge of the cabinet beneath the photos. You told people you were going to run the company one day. She looked down. I was a kid, she said. Yes. I didn't disagree. But I didn't dismiss it either. You believed in it, I said. In me. She shifted slightly, crossing her arms loosely. That was a long time ago. It was. And it wasn't. Things change, she added. They do. I let that sit for a moment. Then I asked, gently, when did it change for you? She looked up at me, caught off guard. What? When did it change? I repeated. When did I stop being part of that future? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. Because there isn't a clean answer to a question like that. Change doesn't announce itself. It happens in small moments. Quiet decisions. Missed calls. Shifted priorities. I didn't plan it like that, she said finally. I know. That's just how life went. I studied her face for a moment, trying to see the little girl from the photo. The one who believed. The one who stayed. She didn't plan it either, I said. She frowned slightly. Who? Your mother-in-law. Her expression tightened just a bit. That's different. Is it? Yes, she said quickly. She needs us more. There it was again. Need. I nodded slowly. And I don't. It wasn't a question. She hesitated. You've always been strong, she said. You don't rely on anyone. I let out a quiet breath. That's what you think strength looks like. She didn't answer, because now she wasn't as sure. Strength, I said, is knowing when to stand alone. I paused, and when not to be left behind. That landed. She shifted again, uncomfortable now. I didn't leave you behind, she said. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I walked over to the drawer near the entryway, the one where I had placed the flower. I opened it slowly, reached inside, and took it out. The plastic stem felt just as light as before, just as hollow. I turned back and held it up slightly. This, I said. Her eyes dropped to it, then quickly away. It was just a small thing, she muttered. Yes, I said. It didn't mean, it meant exactly what it showed. She shook her head, frustration rising again. No, I didn't raise my voice. Didn't interrupt sharply. I just spoke over the edge of her sentence. Calm. Even. You gave her something that said she mattered. I lowered the flower slightly. And you gave me something that said I didn't. Silence. This time, she didn't argue. Didn't correct. Didn't explain. Because now, there was nothing left to say about it. She looked at the floor. Then back at me. Her eyes different now. Not defensive. Not dismissive. Just aware. I didn't think you'd see it that way, she said softly. I nodded. I know. That was the problem. Not intention. Not even action. Just lack of awareness. And that kind of thing doesn't fix itself. It reveals itself. Slowly. Until one day, you can't ignore it anymore. I walked past her and placed the flower gently on the table. Right in the center. Where it stood out against everything else. Artificial. Out of place. Undeniable. Then I turned back to her. Calm. Clear. This is where we are now, I said. She followed my gaze to the flower. Then back to me. And for the first time since she walked into the house, she didn't try to change the conversation. Because she couldn't. Because now she could see it too. And once you see something like that, you can't go back to pretending it's not there. She kept looking at the flower. Not touching it. Not picking it up. Just looking. As if the longer she stared, the meaning might change. It didn't. I didn't think it would feel this big, she said quietly. I didn't answer. Because it wasn't big. Not in the way she meant. It was precise. That's different. I walked past her and sat down slowly on the couch, my hands resting lightly in my lap. From where I sat, I could see both her and the flower on the table between us. A line. Clear. Unavoidable. She finally moved, taking a few slow steps toward me, then stopping halfway like she wasn't sure how close she was allowed to get. Mom, can we just talk about this? She asked. We are talking. No, I mean really talk. Not like this. I tilted my head slightly. What does like this mean? She exhaled. Like everything is already decided. I nodded once. Because that part was true. Some things are, I said. Her shoulders dropped just a little. Because of one day, she asked. I shook my head. Because of many days, I replied. Silence. Then she walked the rest of the way over and sat down across from me. Not too close. Not too far. Careful. I didn't realize it had gotten this far, she admitted. I studied her for a moment. And for the first time since she walked in, I believed her. Not as an excuse, but as a fact. I know, I said. That seemed to confuse her again. You keep saying that, she said. Like you expected this. I didn't expect it, I replied. I noticed it. She looked down at her hands. Quiet. Thinking. So what now? She asked after a moment. There it was. The question she had been circling since she arrived. Not about the flower. Not even about yesterday. About what comes next. I leaned back slightly against the couch. Now, I said slowly, I make decisions based on what's real, not what I hope things were. She nodded faintly, not agreeing, just hearing it. And that means selling the company? She asked. I didn't answer right away, because that wasn't the whole truth. It means I'm not leaving things the way they are, I said. Her fingers tightened together slightly. That company is everything, she said. You built it. Dad built it. It's part of our family. I watched her carefully. Not her words. Her intent. Is it? I asked. She frowned. Of course it is. Then why does it only matter now? That hit. Again. Because she didn't have a quick answer. It's always mattered, she said, but her voice wasn't as steady. Not enough to ask about it, I replied. I have asked when. She stopped. Because we both knew. She hadn't. Not really. Not in a way that showed ownership. Only in a way that assumed it. That's not fair, she said again. But softer this time. I didn't respond to that word anymore. It had already lost its meaning. Instead, I stood up and walked back toward my office. Not to leave her, but to show her. If she was going to understand, she needed to see it clearly. She followed this time without hesitation. Inside, the room felt different with both of us in it. More exposed. I walked to the desk and opened the laptop again. The screen lit up, reflecting faintly in her eyes as she stepped closer. What are you doing? She asked. Showing you, I said. I turned the screen slightly so she could see. Documents. Numbers. Structures. Everything that made the company real. This is what you're asking me not to sell, I said. She leaned in slightly, scanning quickly. I know what it is, she said. Do you? She looked at me, a bit defensive. Yes. I nodded. Then I clicked into another file. Detailed reports. Operational breakdowns. Names of employees. Years of data. Do you know how many people depend on this? I asked. She hesitated. Not exactly. 83, I said. Her eyes flickered. I continued. Do you know how many contracts we have active right now? She shook her head slightly. No. Do you know what happens if I step away without a clear plan? Silence. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't. This isn't just a family thing, I said calmly. It's a responsibility. She crossed her arms slightly. I'm not saying it's not, she replied. I'm just saying you don't have to rush into something permanent. I clicked the screen again. Pulled up another document. Ownership. Blank where her name could have been. Why not? I asked. She blinked. What? Why shouldn't I make a permanent decision? Because it affects me, she said again, frustration rising. There it was. Back to that. I nodded slowly. Yes, I said. It does. She stepped closer. Then shouldn't I have a say? I looked at her. Really looked. Not as my daughter. Not as the little girl in the photos. But as the person standing in front of me now. What part of it have you taken responsibility for? I asked. She froze. Completely. Because that question didn't have an easy answer. She started then. Stopped. I didn't push. I didn't need to. The truth was already doing the work. I've helped, she said finally, but it sounded uncertain even to her. With what? I asked. She looked at the screen again. At the details. At the reality she had never stepped into. I didn't know you needed help, she said. I nodded once. That's exactly the point. Silence filled the room. Deep. Heavy. But this time, it wasn't tense. It was revealing. Because now she could see it. Not just emotionally. Practically. The gap. Between expecting something and actually being part of it. I closed the laptop slowly. Soft click. Then I looked at her. Calm. Clear. This isn't about taking something away from you, I said. Her eyes lifted to mine. Then what is it about? I held her gaze for a second. Then answered. It's about not giving something to someone who was never really there for it. And this time, she didn't argue. Because now, she understood exactly what that meant. She didn't speak after that. Not immediately. She just stood there, looking at me. Then at the closed laptop. Then back at me again. As if she was trying to find a version of this conversation where things hadn't already shifted. But there wasn't one. Mom, she said finally, her voice lower now, stripped of everything it had carried before. That's not true. I didn't react. Didn't challenge it. I just waited. Because if she was going to say something real, it needed space. I have been there, she continued, a little more firmly. Maybe not the way you want, but I didn't just disappear. I nodded slightly. I didn't say you disappeared, I replied. Then what are you saying? She asked, frustration starting to rise again, but softer this time, less certain. I held her gaze. I'm saying you were present when it was convenient. That landed. Not sharply, but deeply. She looked away again. Toward the desk. Toward the walls. Anywhere but me. That's not fair, she repeated, but this time, it didn't sound like an argument. It sounded like a defense she wasn't sure she believed. I didn't respond to it. Instead, I walked past her again, out of the office. Back into the living room. I could hear her follow, slower. This time, less urgency, more hesitation. I stopped near the table. The flower was still there, exactly where I had left it, unchanged. I picked it up again, turning it lightly between my fingers. You know what the hardest part is? I asked quietly. She didn't answer, didn't interrupt, just listened. It's not the difference in value, I continued. It's the difference in thought. I placed the flower back down, carefully, centered. You didn't forget me, I said. You just reduced me. Silence. Heavy. Honest. Behind me, I heard her shift. A small movement. Then, I didn't mean to, she said. And this time, I believed her. That's what made it harder. I know, I replied. Because intention doesn't erase impact. It just explains it. I turned to face her again. She looked different now. Not defensive. Not dismissive. Just exposed. Like she was seeing something she hadn't expected to see. In me. Or maybe in herself. So what happens now? She asked. Again. But this time, it wasn't about stopping me. It was about understanding what she had already set in motion. I walked over to the couch and sat down again. Slower this time. More deliberate. She stayed standing for a second, then sat across from me. Closer than before. Not by much. But enough. Now, I said, I do what I should have done a long time ago. Her brows pulled together slightly. And what is that? I rested my hands together lightly. Separate emotion from decision. She blinked. Confused. You think this isn't emotional? She asked. I shook my head slightly. It was, I said. Yesterday. I paused. Today it's not. That changed something in her expression. Because now she understood. This wasn't reaction anymore. It was direction. You're really going to go through with it, she said quietly. I didn't answer right away. Because it wasn't just one thing. It wasn't just selling the company. It was something bigger. Something quieter. I'm going to make sure that what I built is handled by people who understand its value, I said. Her eyes sharpened slightly. And you don't think that's me? It wasn't a question. I didn't soften it. I didn't dress it up. I think you're just starting to see it. I replied. Silence. Longer this time. She leaned back slightly, her arms resting loosely at her sides now. No tension. No defense. Just thinking. I didn't realize I had to prove that, she said after a moment. You don't, I replied. She looked up, confused again. Then what are you saying? I'm saying it shows on its own, I said. Over time. In actions. She nodded faintly. Slowly. Like she was piecing it together. And I haven't shown it, she said. It wasn't defensive anymore. It was observational. I held her gaze. No, I said. That was it. No lecture. No list of examples. Just the truth. And somehow, that made it heavier. She looked down at her hands again. Quiet. Still. Then, what if I want to, she asked. I watched her carefully. What if I want to be part of it, she added. There it was. Not expectation. Not assumption. Something new. Intent. I didn't answer immediately. Because that question, that one mattered. Not for me. For her. Why? I asked. She looked up again, caught off guard. Why? She repeated. Yes. She hesitated. Because this time, there wasn't a quick answer. Not one she could say without thinking. I don't know, she admitted. Honest. For the first time. She paused. I never thought about it like this. I nodded slowly. That's clear. She let out a small breath. Not frustration. Something else. Release. I thought it would just be there, she said. There. That word again. Not built. Not earned. Just there. I leaned back slightly. It will be, I said. Her eyes lifted. Hope. Small. Careful. But not in the way you think. And just like that, it shifted again. Because now she understood something else. This wasn't about whether the company would exist. It was about who would be part of it. And for the first time, she wasn't sure where she stood. She didn't respond right away after I said that. But not in the way you think. The words stayed between us. Not loud. Not harsh. Just final. She leaned back slightly into the couch. Her eyes no longer searching for an argument. Now they were searching for footing. For something stable. Something she could still hold on to. So what does that mean? She asked quietly. I looked at her for a moment. Not as someone who needed to be corrected, but as someone who was finally listening. It means, I said slowly, that the company will continue. A small shift in her expression. Relief. But I didn't let it settle. Just not under assumptions, I continued. That took it away again. Her shoulders dropped slightly. So you are selling it, she said. Not a question this time. A realization. I'm exploring that option, I replied. She nodded faintly. Processing. And if you do, she hesitated, then pushed through. That's it? It's just gone. I shook my head. No, I said. Nothing I built disappears that easily. Silence. Then why? She asked. This time, not defensive. Not reactive. Just wanting to understand. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on my knees. Because ownership without responsibility creates entitlement, I said. She didn't interrupt. Didn't argue. So I continued. And entitlement, I added, destroys things faster than bad management ever could. Her eyes lowered. Not in shame. In recognition. I didn't think of it like that, she admitted. I know. That answer came easier now. Because it was no longer something I was holding against her. It was simply what was true. She took a slow breath. Then another. Trying to steady herself. So what happens at your meeting today? She asked. I glanced briefly toward the hallway. Toward my office. Then back at her. I sit down, I said, and I make decisions that align with reality. And I'm not part of that reality? She asked. There was no accusation in her voice this time. Just uncertainty. I considered the question. Carefully. You're part of my life, I said. She looked up, listening closely now. But the company, I continued, is something different. She nodded slowly, as if she already knew that, but had never said it out loud. I always thought, she started, then stopped. What? I asked. That it would come to me, she finished. There it was again. Not greed. Not even intention. Just expectation. I didn't react to it. Because that's exactly what needed to be seen. And now? I asked. She looked down at her hands again. Then back up. I don't know. She said honestly. That was the first real answer she had given all morning. And it mattered. Because, I don't know, leaves room for change. Assumption doesn't. I stood up slowly. Not abruptly. Just enough to shift the energy in the room. I have a meeting in a few hours, I said. She nodded. I know. I'll be leaving soon. Another nod. She didn't ask to come. Didn't ask to be included. That, more than anything, told me she was starting to understand the boundaries. Not because I forced them, but because she could finally see them. Can I ask you something? She said after a moment. I turned slightly toward her. Yes. If I had done things differently, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Would this be different? I looked at her. Really looked. Because that question, that one wasn't about the company. It was about us. Yes, I said. No hesitation. No softness. Just truth. She nodded slowly, absorbing it. And is it too late? She asked. I didn't answer right away. Because the answer wasn't simple. Not anymore. It's late, I said. Her expression shifted. Slightly. But not for everything, I added. She held on to that. I could see it. Not as reassurance, but as direction. What does that mean? She asked. It means, I said, that some things can still change. I paused. But not everything resets. She nodded. Again. Slower this time. Deeper. I understand, she said. And this time, I believed her. Not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't say. No more arguments. No more excuses. Just acceptance. I walked toward the entryway, reaching for my purse. She stood up as well. Automatically. Like she used to when she was younger. Some habits. They don't disappear completely. I'll walk you out, she said. I nodded once. We moved toward the door together. Not rushed. Not tense. Just quiet. At the door, I paused for a second. My hand resting on the handle. Mom, she said behind me. I turned slightly. Yes. She hesitated. Then, I'm sorry. Simple. No explanation. No justification. Just that. I looked at her. And for a moment, I saw the girl from the photos again. Not fully, but enough. I know, I said. Because now, she did too. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air felt different. Cooler. Clearer. I walked to my car, got in, and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. Through the windshield, I could see her standing in the doorway. Watching. Not calling out. Not stopping me. Just watching. That was new. I started the engine. And as I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back again. Because where I was going didn't require permission. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't require explanation either. The drive to Richard's office was quiet. Not empty. Just focused. I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't check my phone. Didn't let my mind drift back to the conversation at home. Because that part was already done. What mattered now was what came next. I pulled into the parking lot 10 minutes early. I always do that. Time has a way of revealing who you are, especially in moments like this. I turned off the engine and sat there for a second, my hands resting on the steering wheel. Steady. No hesitation. Then I stepped out of the car and walked inside. Richard's office hadn't changed. Same neutral walls. Same quiet reception area. Same sense of order. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Carter," the receptionist greeted. "Good afternoon," I replied. "Mr. Hale is ready for you." Of course he was. I walked down the hallway, heels soft against the carpet, and stepped into his office. He stood as I entered. "Mrs. Carter," he said with a slight nod. "It's good to see you." "You too, Richard." We shook hands. Firm, professional, familiar. "Please, have a seat," he said, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. I sat down, placing my purse neatly beside me. He didn't waste time. Neither did I. "I've prepared the documents you requested," he said, sliding a folder toward me. "Ownership structures, sales scenarios, and contingency options." I opened it slowly. Page after page. Clean. Organized. Clear. Just the way I like it. "What are you leaning toward?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I turned a page. Then another. Letting the information settle, not because I needed to understand it, but because I needed to confirm it. Everything was exactly as I expected. That mattered. "I want a clean transition," I said finally. He nodded. "Full sale?" "Yes." No hesitation. No pause. Just that. He studied me for a moment. Not questioning. Just confirming. "And your daughter?" he asked. There it was. The only variable. I met his gaze calmly. "She's not part of this decision." He nodded once. "Understood." No follow-up questions. That's why I chose him. "Very well," he said. "We can proceed with identifying buyers immediately. There are already a few interested parties." "I'm sure there are. A company like mine doesn't sit unnoticed." "And the timeline?" he asked. "As soon as possible," I replied. "Expedited, then?" "Yes." He made a few notes. "Efficient. Precise." Then he slid another document toward me. "This outlines the initial authorization to begin the process." I looked at it. Simple. Direct. A signature, and everything would begin. I picked up the pen, held it for a second, not because I was unsure, but because I understood exactly what it meant. Not just financially, not just professionally, personally. This was the moment where intention became action, where clarity became consequence. And I was ready for that. I signed. Calm. Steady. Final. Richard nodded slightly as he took the document back. "I'll begin immediately," he said. "Thank you." We stood. Another handshake. Same as before, but different. Because now something had shifted. Not just in the paperwork. In everything. I left the office without looking back. Because there was nothing behind me that needed revisiting. When I stepped outside, the air felt lighter. Not easier. Just clearer. I got into my car and placed my purse on the passenger seat. For a moment, I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, letting the silence settle. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at it. One message. Then another. Then another. I picked it up. Missed calls. Again. More this time. Faster. Closer together. I unlocked the screen. Messages flooded in. "Mom, where are you? Please call me. I just talked to someone from the office. What's going on? Mom, don't do this." I read them all. Slowly. Carefully. Then I set the phone back down. Didn't respond. Not yet. Because this wasn't for discussion. It was already in motion. I started the engine. Pulled out of the parking lot. And as I drove, the phone kept buzzing. Again. And again. And again. By the time I reached the main road, I didn't need to check it anymore. I already knew. She knew. Not everything. But enough. Enough to understand that something had changed. Enough to realize that control had shifted. I stopped at a red light. The phone buzzed again. This time, I picked it up. 23 missed calls. And counting. I watched the screen for a second. Then, it rang again. Her name. Flashing. Persistent. I let it ring once. Twice. 3 times. Then I answered. I didn't say anything. I just listened. "Mom," her voice came through immediately, breathless, unsteady. "Mom, please, tell me this isn't what I think it is." I looked ahead at the road. Calm. Focused. "What do you think it is?" I asked. A pause. Short. Tight. "You're selling the company," she said. Not a question. A realization. "Yes," I replied. Silence. Then, No, no, Mom, you can't. Her voice broke slightly. You can't do that. Not like this. I already have. Another silence. Longer. Heavier. Why? She asked, and this time, it wasn't defensive. It wasn't frustrated. It was something else. Fear. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't explain again. Didn't go back to yesterday. Because none of that mattered now. Because I'm done leaving things in the hands of assumptions, I said. She inhaled sharply. Mom, please, we can talk about this. We can figure something out. I waited a second, then answered. We already did. That stopped her. Completely. Please, she said again, softer now. Don't go through with it. I looked at the light. Still red. Still waiting. Just like she was. It's already started, I said. The light turned green. I pressed the gas gently. Moved forward. And this time, I added, my voice steady. I'm not stopping halfway. I ended the call. And the phone kept ringing. The phone kept ringing for a while after I ended the call. Then it stopped. Not immediately. Not all at once. But gradually. Like someone realizing that no matter how many times they try, the answer isn't going to change. I didn't pick it up again. I didn't need to. Because everything that needed to be said already had been. By the time I got home, the sun had started to lower. The light coming through the windows was softer now. Warmer. Different from the sharp clarity of the morning. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and stood there for a moment. The house felt the same. Unchanged. And yet not. I walked slowly into the living room. The flower was still there. Exactly where I had left it. Centered on the table. Still artificial. Still out of place. But now, it meant something different. Not just a moment. A turning point. I picked it up one last time. Held it in my hand. Turned it gently between my fingers. Then I walked over to the shelf by the window. And instead of putting it away in a drawer, I placed it there. In the open. Where I could see it. Not as something to hide. But as something to remember. Because clarity deserves to be visible. I stepped back and looked at it for a second. Then I turned away. The house was quiet again. But this time it felt earned. I walked down the hallway to my office. The door still slightly open. The same as I had left it. Inside, everything was in place. The desk. The chair. The laptop. I stepped in and sat down slowly. Opened the laptop. There were already emails waiting. Updates. Requests. Interest. The process had begun. Exactly as planned. Exactly as decided. No hesitation. No delay. I scrolled through them briefly. Then closed the screen. Not because it didn't matter. But because it didn't need my attention right now. Some things, once set in motion, take care of themselves. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. Not heavy. Not tired. Just complete. For years, I had thought that holding on was strength. That patience meant loyalty. That silence meant peace. But I was wrong. Holding on without being seen isn't strength. It's surrender. And I had surrendered enough. There was a soft sound from the front of the house. The door opening. Then closing. I didn't move. Didn't call out. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps. Slower this time. Careful. Then she appeared at the office door again. My daughter. She didn't rush in. Didn't speak right away. She just stood there. Looking at me. Different from before. No urgency. No panic. Just something quieter. I saw the emails, she said finally. I nodded once. I figured you would. Silence. Then she stepped inside. Not all the way. Just enough. I didn't come to stop you, she said. That caught my attention. Not because I didn't believe her. But because I did. I looked at her. Waited. She hesitated. I didn't want the last thing I said to you to be like that. I studied her face. There was no performance there. No calculation. Just honesty. I understand, I said. She nodded. A small breath leaving her. Then she looked around the office. At the walls. At the desk. At the space she used to sit in as a child. I remember this room being smaller, she said softly. It was, I replied. A faint smile touched her lips. For a while, I thought this place would always be here, she said. Exactly like this. I leaned back slightly. It will be, I said. She looked at me. Confused. Then I added. Just not in the way you expected. She nodded. This time she understood. Fully. Not just the words. The meaning behind them. I think. She paused, searching for the right way to say it. I think I stopped seeing what this really was. I didn't interrupt. Let her finish. I saw it as something that would eventually be mine, she continued. Not something that needed to be respected now. Honest. Clear. Late. but real. I nodded slowly. That's the difference, I said. She swallowed lightly. I see that now. We sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable. Not tense. Just still. I don't expect anything from it anymore, she said after a while. I looked at her. Not for the words. For the truth behind them. And this time, I didn't see expectation. I saw understanding. That mattered. More than anything she could have said earlier. I'm glad, I replied. She nodded, then took a small step back. Toward the door. I'll let you rest, she said. I didn't stop her. Didn't ask her to stay. Because this wasn't about holding on anymore. It was about letting things be what they were. She paused at the doorway, then turned back slightly. Mom. Yes. She hesitated. Then, I do respect you. I held her gaze. For a second. Too. Then I nodded. Now you do. She didn't argue. Didn't defend. She just accepted it. And then, she left. The house returned to silence once again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty. Not quiet. Resolved. I sat there for a moment longer, then stood up and walked back into the living room. The evening light had softened even more now, casting long shadows across the floor. I glanced at the flower on the shelf. Still there. Still the same. But no longer insignificant. I didn't pick it up again. I didn't need to. Because its purpose had already been fulfilled. I turned off the lights, one by one, and made my way toward the hallway. And as I passed the shelf, I paused for just a second. Not to dwell. Not to regret. Just to acknowledge. Respect, I said quietly, almost to myself, was all I ever wanted. I let the words settle. Then I continued walking. Now, I added softly, it's no longer yours to give. And this time, I didn't look back.